Extremely violent earthquakes are currently occurring all over the world. The worst events took place in Venezuela, but the Earth is also shaking unusually strongly in many other places right now. What's happening to our planet, and could it get even worse? We'll get to the bottom of this today, and we'll dive right in. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced an earthquake, and if so, where it happened. And if you'd like to stay up to date on the latest geological news, please subscribe to the channel. It's free and you'll always get a notification. And if you're already subscribed, please support the video with a thumbs up. 5,000 likes should be enough to appease the YouTube algorithm. Thanks a lot, everyone. Venezuela has been rocked by two extremely powerful earthquakes, both within less than a minute of each other. According to the USGS, the first quake had a magnitude of 7.1 to 7.2 and the second 7.5. Both occurred west of Caracas, and the shallow depth of the quakes, only about 10 kilometers below the surface, made them particularly dangerous. In Caracas and in the state of La Guaira, buildings collapsed. The Mayotte airport was damaged. Electricity, cell service, and transportation were partially disrupted, and worst of all, more than 1,400 people were killed and countless others were injured. Some geologists fear that this seismic activity on the American double continent could be a harbinger of the so-called Big One, a devastating super earthquake along the San Andreas Fault. The San Andreas Fault is not just any fault line in the Earth's crust. It stretches over 1,300 kilometers through California and separates the North American plate from the Pacific plate. In 1906, it reduced San Francisco to rubble and ashes. In 1857, it devastated Southern California. Since then, things have been relatively quiet, at least as far as the really big quakes are concerned. But geologists know this is the calm before the storm. That's because there's a section of this fault that behaves like a Swiss watch. Near the small town of Parkfield, in the heart of California, the Earth quakes roughly every 22 years, as the last quake there occurred in 2004. North of Parkfield, the Earth's crust is continuously pushing forward, at a rate of about 3.5 centimeters per year. To the south, however, it is locked in place, and Parkfield is precisely the transition zone between these two areas. Researchers use this geological laboratory to learn more about earthquakes. Even with state-of-the-art seismological technology, we still can't predict earthquakes with absolute reliability. But perhaps that's about to change, because a new study has uncovered something fascinating. Dr. Luca Malanini and his team examined the seismic waves traveling through the rock beneath Parkfield. More specifically, they looked at how these waves lose energy as they travel through the subsurface. Shortly before the 2004 earthquake, this attenuation behavior changed in a very distinctive way. Now it gets a little technical, but don't worry, I'll explain it to you. The researchers observed that about 6 weeks before the quake, the damping of high-frequency waves decreased, while that of low-frequency waves increased. Scientists are now seeing exactly this pattern again. It's as if the Earth beneath Parkfield is starting to hum like a kettle just before it whistles. Tension is building, the rock is changing, and at some point this energy has to be released. Researchers believe we're on the verge of the next Parkfield earthquake, and it's expected to have a magnitude of about 6 on the Richter scale again. And Parkfield serves as a kind of harbinger. It indicates just how much tension is building up along the San Andreas Fault. Experts estimate there is about a 75% probability that a truly devastating earthquake with a magnitude of 7 or higher will strike the region within the next 30 years. That is equivalent to an explosion of 475,000 metric tons of TNT, or 38 Hiroshima atomic bombs. This could reduce cities like Los Angeles or San Francisco to rubble, leave millions of people homeless, and turn the economies of California and its neighboring states upside down. No wonder then that geologists are keeping a close eye on the San Andreas Fault. Geothermal plants in the region could now pose yet another problem. This is because to access geothermal energy, water is injected into the ground and then pumped back out. This alters the pressure within the rock, and that, at least in theory, could trigger earthquakes or amplify existing stresses. Some researchers see a clear link between geothermal energy production and increased seismic activity. Others are a bit more cautious and are calling for further research first. But let's get back to Parkfield and the possible upcoming earthquake. What does this actually mean for the local residents? Parkfield itself is tiny, only about 24 people live there, but the insights we gain here could save lives throughout California. Because if we learn to recognize the precursors of earthquakes, we might eventually be able to develop even better early warning systems. But California is by no means the only region where things can get dangerous. On the other side of the world, in one of the most densely populated cities on Earth, the next mega earthquake could be much closer than many people realize. We're talking about Istanbul, where a major disaster also looms. On April 23rd, the Earth shook in the Sea of Marmara off the Turkish coast with a magnitude of 6.2. Many people ran out into the streets in panic. Over 350 were injured, but fortunately there were no fatalities. Yet what seems to most people like a single frightening event is, for seismologists, a troubling piece of a much larger puzzle. The epicenter was located precisely at a spot that geologists have been monitoring with growing concern for decades, the North Anatolian Fault. This massive fault line, stretching 1,500 kilometers, runs right through Turkey and passes just about 20 kilometers south of Istanbul. And it is precisely here that enormous stress has been building up for centuries, which could eventually be released in a catastrophic earthquake. The stress released by the quake places additional strain on the fault. The North Anatolian Fault is what is known as a transform fault. Here, two tectonic plates slide horizontally past one another, the Anatolian plate to the south and the Eurasian plate to the north. Normally, the plates would move past each other evenly. The problem here, however, is that the plates are locked together and the stress continues to build. The last truly massive earthquake in this region occurred in 1766. It had a magnitude of 7.1 and claimed around 4,000 lives. However, only about 500,000 people lived in Istanbul at that time. Today there are more than 16 million. A particularly concerning factor is the direction in which the earthquake would propagate. Martinus Gasson has found that in 72% of the earthquakes studied in this region, the fault ruptures in a northeasterly direction, that is directly toward Istanbul. A 2016 study concluded that the probability of an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.3 or higher occurring in the next 30 years is 47%. That's practically a coin toss, and of those 30 years, nearly 10 have already passed. The last major event was the devastating 1999 Izmit earthquake, which measured 7.6 on the Richter scale and claimed the lives of over 17,000 people. But scientists aren't giving up. They're trying to monitor the fault as closely as possible. In addition to conventional seismometers and GPS stations, quite innovative methods are now being used, such as unused fiber optic cables from telecommunications companies. These cables can be used as giant sensors to measure ground movements with high precision. On land, there is one measuring point per meter. Through such measurements, scientists can determine in which neighborhoods the ground would particularly amplify an earthquake. That is where the greatest damage would occur. This, in turn, provides valuable information for urban planners and disaster response agencies. Modern building codes, if followed, could significantly improve the safety of buildings. In Tokyo, for example, another metropolis in a highly active earthquake zone, strict building codes and regular drills have helped ensure that even strong quakes often cause only limited damage. But Istanbul still has a long way to go. There are too many old, unstable buildings and too little time for reinforcement or demolition. It's an uncomfortable truth that millions of people wake up to and go to sleep with every day. In any case, research on the North Anatolian Fault continues, and every new finding could help save lives. The combination of earthquakes and volcanoes is always particularly dangerous, and that's exactly what we have in Tenerife. At 3,715 meters, Mount Teide is not only the highest mountain in Spain, but also the third highest island volcano in the world. But size isn't everything. What's going on inside the mountain is much more important, and that's exactly what's worrying volcanologists. The Scientific Committee for the Assessment and Monitoring of Volcanic Phenomena in the Canary Islands, CCES for short, has issued an alarming statement. It states that the Teide volcano is exhibiting geophysical activity characterized by increased seismicity, geodetic deformations, and gas emissions. Let me put it this way: the mountain is shaking, deforming, and emitting more gases than usual, and these are typical signs that something is brewing inside the volcano. The committee convened following a series of earthquakes that occurred on January 22nd at the southern foot of Teide, and that points to direct activity underground. Teide's activity has increased significantly in recent years. Since 2016, monitoring networks have been recording the geophysical changes beneath the mountain, and especially since 2022, the signs of volcanic activity have increased sharply. researchers are observing several concerning developments at once: seismic swarms, ground deformation, and fluctuations in volcanic gas emissions. According to the scientists, all these factors point to a rising pressure within the hydrothermal system beneath the stratovolcano. The Teide's last major eruption was quite some time ago. It took place in 1909, over 110 years ago. At that time, however, the volcano did not erupt from the main crater, but from a secondary crater called Cignero. The eruption lasted 10 days, but fortunately did not destroy any settlements. The last major eruption from the main crater occurred even longer ago. It occurred about 1,150 years ago, so Teide could be under quite a bit of pressure. On top of that, Teide is one of the largest volcanoes in Europe and has been classified by the United Nations as one of 16 decade volcanoes worldwide. These are volcanoes that are particularly dangerous due to their size, location, and eruption history. In the worst case scenario, massive pyroclastic flows could occur, hurtling down the mountain slopes at high speed. The island's capital, Santa Cruz de Tenerife, as well as the tourist centers in the southwest of the island, would be affected by the volcanic ash. Air traffic would likely have to be completely suspended in the event of a major eruption. The ash cloud could paralyze the entire Canary Islands airspace. Just like the 2010 eruption of that famous volcano in Iceland, which brought European air traffic to a standstill for days, I won't even try to pronounce its name. Fortunately, experts see no immediate danger, at least for the near future. At the same time, however, measures should be taken to prepare the population through drills. The authorities have massively stepped up monitoring of the volcano in recent years. Today, Teide is one of the most closely monitored volcanoes in the world. A dense network of seismometers, GPS stations, and gas sensors registers even the slightest change. Should the situation escalate, scientists would therefore notice it in time. In the event of an impending eruption, the population would have at least 72 hours to evacuate. We've now seen that South America, North America, Turkey, and the Canary Islands have all been hit by earthquakes. But what many people don't realize is that even in the heart of Europe, in Germany, we're not immune to tectonic events. More specifically, along the Upper Rhine Rift Valley in Baden-Württemberg, the entire region is a spectacle, as the Upper Rhine Graben is a fascinating geological formation that stretches from Basel in the south to Frankfurt in the north. Millions of years ago, extreme geological processes were at work here when the Earth's crust began to stretch in Central Europe, leading to a rift-like split. In geological terms, a relatively rigid tectonic plate shifted horizontally here. At that time, the Eurasian and African plates were drifting toward each other, a process that primarily gave rise to the Alps, but also caused stretching in the Earth's crust at weaker points, causing the area to subside into a rift valley. However, the depression was repeatedly filled with sediments from neighboring areas, which were deposited there. After the rift valley formed, the tectonic plates rose again, which ultimately led to the Upper Rhine Rift Valley's current shape. In fact, the area still exhibits elevated seismicity today, and earthquakes occur on average every few months. These earthquakes, however, are very minor, with a magnitude of 3 at most, but can be felt by people located directly at the epicenter of the quake. Researchers say that roughly every 10 years, larger earthquakes occur that are felt across the region, and with a magnitude of 5 can even cause damage. In 1356, a devastating earthquake struck the region around Basel, right beneath the village of Rheinach. Houses collapsed, people fled in panic onto the streets, the town caught fire, and nearly all the churches and castles in the surrounding area were damaged. Researchers now estimate that this earthquake must have had a magnitude of 6. There are still so-called weak zones in the Upper Rhine Rift Valley, created by the pressure of the African plate against the Eurasian plate. These zones lie along the fault lines that formed during the rift's tectonic activity and exhibit increased vulnerability to geological events such as earthquakes or even volcanism. In other words, they're essentially a seismic predetermined breaking point. In this case, the term used is intraplate seismicity, that is, seismic activity that occurs within a tectonic plate rather than at the plate's edges. According to researchers, the activity along the Upper Rhine Rift Valley is moderate by global standards and nowhere near as dramatic as in earthquake-prone regions located directly at tectonic plate boundaries, such as in Turkey. Research in this area is nevertheless important because if a strong earthquake were to strike the Upper Rhine Rift Valley today, it would have devastating consequences. In this partly densely populated region, significant damage to buildings and infrastructure could occur if they are not built to withstand earthquakes. Therefore, it is essential to be prepared for all eventualities here as well. There's one thing many people don't realize. It's not necessarily land-based earthquakes that are the most dangerous, but rather underwater earthquakes, specifically deep-sea earthquakes. On May 10, 2018, the residents of the island of Mayotte, located in the Indian Ocean in part of France, were taken by surprise by an earthquake. With a magnitude of 5.8 on the Richter scale, it was certainly a serious seismic event, but it was soon forgotten. Geographically, Mayotte is part of the Comoros archipelago, a volcanic group of islands east of Africa. Due to its volcanic activity, the area is already of great interest to geoscientists, so after the earthquake, a group of French researchers set out for Mayotte to get to the bottom of the matter in the truest sense of the word. The team began surveying the seafloor in February 2019. Using a so-called fan beam echo sounder, a device for electroacoustic measurement of ocean depths, they mapped an area of 8,600 square kilometers of the seafloor. Within this area, the scientists deployed a network of seismometers on the seafloor at depths of up to 3.5 kilometers. Between February 25th and May 6, 2019, 17,000 seismic events were recorded from a depth of up to 50 kilometers below the seafloor. The researchers were very surprised by the depth of these recorded earthquakes, as seismic events measured on the seafloor usually occur much closer to the surface. Using data from the seismometers and measurements taken during the earthquake off Mayotte, the researchers were then able to reconstruct exactly what happened. This was the largest submarine volcanic eruption ever recorded. The eruption on the seafloor off Mayotte resulted in the formation of a gigantic underwater volcano. The French researchers also have a hypothesis about how the volcano may have formed in this case. According to this hypothesis, it began with a magma reservoir deep within the mantle. Beneath the new volcano, tectonic processes may have caused damage, forcing the magma from the chamber upward through the crust and triggering numerous earthquakes in the process. The magma flow eventually reached the seafloor, where an eruption occurred, ejecting about 5 cubic kilometers of lava and thereby forming the new volcano. Given the unimaginable forces at work here, it is by no means certain that the geological process has already come to an end. This in turn would be a way to learn more about the Earth's interior and the various layers of our planet. It's not even remotely possible to drill into the deeper layers of our Earth beneath the crust and see with our own eyes what's happening there. And that's why we should always view seismic events as a window into the Earth's interior. And this story shows once again that in some respects we know just as little about our own planet as we do about outer space. I hope you're now up to speed on what's currently happening with our planet's geology. I'll keep you updated on tectonic events like these in the future too, so feel free to subscribe to the channel now, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up button to help us reach 5,000 likes. And now let's shift our focus from earthly disasters to mishaps in space. Right now, a NASA space telescope is hurtling toward Earth out of control, no joke. If nothing is done, it'll be on a collision course with us very soon. And NASA has now launched an absolutely crazy rescue mission to prevent the worst from happening. You can find out exactly what's going on in the video shown in the top right corner. It's really exciting. Be sure to check it out. But as always, there's another video about science and space in the bottom right corner. Otherwise, I'd say see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.